3 weeks ago, we asked the question whether we would have a new Yokozuna at the end of the January Grand Sumo tournament. But after Hoshoryu's incredible win in a three-man playoff, a rare three-man playoff, we might finally have our answer. And we'll talk about it today on the New to Sumo podcast.
Let's start the show. New to Sumo, here we go.
First of all, we just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's getting involved with the channel. If you're new here or new to Sumo, feel free to hit subscribe, like the video, and drop us a comment. We read every single comment we receive and respond to as many of them as we can. And if you have any thoughts about the topics that we get into in this video today, definitely share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, as far as the tournament that we just watched, there were some really unexpected performances from people that we did not think were going to be in the Yusho hunt that really brought it to the final moments. Oho had an incredible tournament. Kinbozan had a really, really impressive tournament all throughout, beating just about everybody to get to the final day. But it was one man who managed to pull ahead at the very end. He had to win 3 straight matches on the final day of the tournament to do it, and it's Hoshoryu. And now the big question is he going to be the Yokozuna to replace the recently retired Terunofuji?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating question simply because the sumo world hasn't really been in this situation where there is simply a outright vacancy at Yokozuna in 30 years. And it's, like we personally speculated about it, last week when his retirement was first announced, but tons and tons of other people have asked it on social media. They all want to know, are they going to be a little bit more lenient with promoting Hoshoryu after, some less than stellar performances simply in order to fill that vacant Yokozuna slot. And at the very least, he is going to have his case heard. I have a tweet thread from the Sumo follower account on X that translated a report from Nikon Sports stating that the Shimpan department has decided to recommend his promotion to Yokozuna to the Yokozuna Deliberation Council. Now, a recommendation does not mean, that it is guaranteed. Basically, how he explains on the second part of his thread is that a special meeting is conferred. Usually they debate amongst themselves over the course of days whether it is decided or not. But the third page of the thread is where it really gets interesting. So if it were a simple, back-to-back Yusho situation, just a simple majority of the council would be needed. But if it is a runner-up situation plus a Yusho situation, then a two-thirds majority of the council is required. So basically, Hoshoryu just needs to cross his fingers and hope that, two-thirds of that council is ready to give him that promotion. And history is usually not on his side in that situation, but this is a very, very unique situation, which is what makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah, I could definitely see it both ways. I could see the council saying that based on the losses that he did have in this tournament, which were to mostly rank and filers, or in this tournament, it was all rank and filers, Atami Fuji, Shodai, and Hirada Umi. They could see it as what kind of Yokozuna are we going to have if he is promoted? It's going to be someone who's giving up Kinboshi left and right. On the other hand, with Terunofuji having just retired, it puts them in a little bit of a tricky situation if they are intent on avoiding a gap with no Yokozuna, because if if he does not get promoted, then the odds now of having a Yokozuna anytime soon drastically go down. Hoshoryu's fantastic, but for him to win the next one also just seems really unlikely based on the past performances. I think his last Yusho win was several years ago at this point. So then we'd be waiting how many more tournaments until someone does step up? Kotozakura seemed like he might have been that person coming into this tournament, and well, that did not go to plan. He ended up having a very, very poor showing this time around. Maybe Onosato seems like the heir apparent, but again, when is that going to be? Because he hasn't been putting up Yusho level performances recently. If they want to have a Yokozuna, this is the opportunity. And I think he's done just about everything that he should to become Yokozuna. I think there is no standout performer who should definitely be getting that role right now. I don't think there's really anyone in the top division who stands out as so above the rest that he deserves to be Yokozuna, and really tower over the rest of the competition. So we're going to be in a bit of a period of, if we have a Yokozuna, they're not going to be the standout performer the way we had with Hakuho, obviously, and Terunofuji when he was healthy. And we just have to decide whether or not we're willing to accept that, or say no, Yokozuna is for the very best of the best. Um, and I think that's ultimately what the decision is going to come down to.
Yeah, 100%. Like Hoshoryu is only 25. He is significantly younger than the last several Yokozuna promotions. So if they promote, and he's also been relatively injury free, other than a couple of situations where he had to, miss the tail end of a Basho. But they really have to decide just how much money they're willing to invest into making someone who had back-to-back tournaments of fewer than 10 wins, in the second half of last year alone. So, they've got a lot of soul searching to do. Is the amount of money that they're likely to risk with, just a bad performance by Hoshoryu where he has, maybe 8 wins and gives up like 4 or 5 losses to rank and file guys. Is that worth going at least 2 tournaments and potentially indefinite tournaments without having a Yokozuna? And why don't we just take a moment to refresh for those who are new to sumo, said the title, how a Yokozuna promotion current usually works. In order to be promoted to Yokozuna, you need to be an Ozeki who has won back-to-back tournaments or delivered consecutive tournaments with a win total equivalent of that. So that usually is in at least 26 wins. Occasionally, like once in a blue moon, they'll do that with about 25 wins. And Hoshoryu is right in that spot where mathematically he could be a Yokozuna and there would be precedent for it. If he had won it with, like, let's say an 11-4 record, it'd be a hell of a lot easier to say no, 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 you've got to wait a little bit longer. You've got to win another U show in order to get the promotion. But the sort of scary thing here is that we haven't had anybody win back-to-back U show since Terunofuji, who is now retired. And I think that may put a little bit of fear into the Sumo Association, where they're like, man, if we don't promote him now and strike while the iron's hot, who knows how many more years we're going to have to wait for one of these Ozeki to be in a situation where that we can do this.
Absolutely. And one thing that concerns me a bit about this situation is that traditionally, once someone is promoted to Yokozuna, they either stay at the top or retire. And Hoshoryu is young and he has a lot of improving to do as a wrestler, and no doubt he's capable of growing and growing and becoming even more capable as his career goes on. But if he gets promoted early, there's always the possibility that he has a run of poor performances and is forced to retire, as is often the case for Yokozuna. Now, the catch there is that often if it looks like someone's going to have a very poor record in a tournament, then they go Kyujo. They exit the tournaments due to injury of some kind. But even then, how long can you continue doing that until you just have to retire because you're not putting up the performances that are expected of a Yokozuna? I think there's such a thing as a risk involved in becoming Yokozuna too early when you still have a lot of learning to do as a wrestler and can't guarantee you'll be putting up Yokozuna level performances, because there's no demotion from Yokozuna. Once you're up there, you either stay up there or you retire. And that was the case with Terunofuji. He couldn't keep up the consistency in performance due to injury, and the only option for him was to retire. It wasn't to be demoted or anything like that. So that is a worry of mine. And if you look at Hoshoryu's recent performances, in the last several tournaments, he's had some really strong ones. He's also had some really weak tournaments. I'll give him a tremendous credit here. No losing records in an absurdly long amount of time, and that's very promising level of consistency to have for Yokozuna. But if you look at what those records are, how many of them are single digit wins? Even 10 wins in a tournament. If you're not getting regular Yusho wins or Jun Yushos, runner up finishes, getting just 10 wins in most tournaments or something around there isn't really what you expect of your Yokozuna. You expect a little bit more than that. Someone who's putting up numbers closer to what we regularly see from Honosato or Kotozakura. So it's very tricky. And I guess I would just end it off by saying that I think there's other considerations to be made beyond whether or not he has earned it based on these last two tournaments. It's the question of if he becomes a Yokozuna, what is that going to look like? What kind of Yokozuna are we getting? And are we maybe risking his future as a wrestler by promoting him too early?
Yeah, it's a really tough question. But I will say this, a lot of a lot of ex Ozeki are going to have a lot of complaints to make, and a lot of them are currently in the Sumo Association if Hoshoryu does get this promotion, because there's a bunch of guys that did pretty much exactly what Hoshoryu did, which is a runner-up finish at 13-2, a U show, or not even a U show at 12-3, who didn't get promotion. In fact, the last let me just make sure I have this count right. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. The last 8 times that we had an Ozeki win 13 and then 12, none of them got promoted. Not one. In fact, the last several times that we had an Ozeki do what he did, which is a runner-up finish followed by a Yusho win, it was Taka Keisho twice in 2020 and 2022. And he never got his Yokozuna promotion. And because he had to, maintain that Ozeki rank, he was forced to retire very, very young, and you got to feel for like he's now working for the Sumo Association, so he's going to just be if he sees, Hoshoryu get his promotion, he will have every right in the world to just raise his hands up in the air and say, "What the hell, man? Like I did this twice and you give it to this other guy on his first go." So there is just tons and tons of precedent at play where if Hoshoryu does not get promoted, you can simply look at the history and say, "Yep, we can understand why they reached this decision." So I think the Sumo Association will be okay with Hoshoryu getting his Yokozuna rope, and I think they will also be content with not giving it to him in the interest of fairness. But that said, we do still have to remark on how absolutely incredible what he simply did last night was, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the key piece here is that regardless of whether or not he becomes Yokozuna, that was a sensational tournament, and certainly the finish towards the end. Just to kind of recap everything that happened over that tournament very briefly, at the beginning, there was no real standout performer. One thing that did stand out to us was the fact that immediately Kotozakura eliminated himself from the possibility of Yokozuna promotion with a very poor showing at the beginning that didn't really turn around, certainly not enough later on. And that left a lot of people in the field who were really vying for that title. But there was one man who stayed undefeated for so much of the tournament and put up an incredible, incredible performance, and that was Kinbozan. He started the tournament 9-0 and then had two losses in his next three. But on the final day of the tournament, all he needed to do was beat Oho to win it, and he lost. And that was what opened up the floor for Hoshoryu if he beat Kotozakura on the final day to then go to the playoff, which was between Kinbozan, Oho, and Hoshoryu. But I have to just take my hat off to Kinbozan, who had a really, really incredible performance that I don't think anybody saw coming, except for the few people maybe that predicted him to have a great tournament in our Kachi Clash prediction. But it was really special. He wins the Fighting Spirit Prize, the Kanto Show, and he's definitely one that people are going to be keeping their eye on now.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that are worth keeping their eye on, let's talk about Oho real quick. We talk a lot about Kotozakura, Hoshoryu, and even Onosato coming either from Yokozuna families or being the proteges of a Yokozuna. Well, Oho happens to be the grandson of, one of the all-time great Yokozuna in the late great Taiho. And for most of his career, his sort of floundering in the rank and file has been sort of a meme, where it's like Kotozakura is the guy who just keeps skyrocketing up the Banzuke while he's, having, just like vacillating between winning and losing records all over the place. But, this was the tournament where it seemed like he finally figured out exactly the kind of sumo tori he is. He the only his only losses the entire tournament came against two of our three current Ozeki and one of our former Ozeki. He dropped to Hoshoryu and Kotozakura and lost to Kirishima on day 12. Other than that, I mean, he just was dominant with the Oshidashi, using that method of victory multiple times. And now that we've got about two or three guys dropping from the Sanyaku ranks, he's very likely going to be getting a Komusubi slot in the next tournament. So good on him. I'm not quite sure if this will technically count as part of his potential Ozeki run, but, if he can continue competing like this, he'll be a high-ranking member of the Sanyaku in very, very short order.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exciting to see, something about those sumo dynasties and sumo families. It's always cool to see performances between them doing so well. We have Kotozakura, obviously, who's following in his namesake, and Hoshoryu, Uncle Asa Shoryu, and now Oho, who's following in his grandfather's footsteps. So it's exciting. And I think Oho definitely has a bright future. He's young. He's definitely got a lot more levels to get to, I think, as a wrestler. Maybe this is the moment where it changes, or maybe he's still got some steady and gradual growth. But I think a Komosubi rank would be very fitting for him. And Kinbozan is going to be moving way up the chart as well, probably into the high M. So we're going to see how he does at that rank, starting the tournament facing off against the Sanyaku. If he can put in a performance anything like he did in this tournament, then we'll have another up and comer as well.
Yeah, there's definitely man, there's going to be a lot to look forward to at the end of February when they release the March Banzuke, and I personally can't wait. Well, we also have a very interesting potential Ozeki situation coming up in March and May as well. It was a little bit under the radar, but Daieisho very quietly put together a incredible 11-4 performance, which is one of the best he's ever had from the Sekiwake position. He's not a guy that's earned a ton of consideration for Ozeki in recent years. He came a little bit close in early 2023, but wound up fading a little bit. But, you can start another Ozeki run from 11. He just needs 22 wins over the next two tournaments, and he'll finally be ready to reach that Ozeki promotion. And the same can be said about Kirishima, the former Ozeki himself and current Maegashira 1. He seemed just completely done after the first 3 days, going 0-3. But then the dude reeled off 10 straight wins to put himself all the way back in the Yusho consideration. If it weren't for a loss to Kinbozan on day 14, he might have won the whole thing, and he might have won the whole thing because he very easily could have reached the playoff and beaten whoever he had to face in that thing. So he's going to be back in the Sanyaku, probably replacing Wakamoto Haru as the second Sekiwake. And yeah, his potential Ozeki returns as well. I spent a good portion of our last preview talking about how, he's going to be sort of a Jekyll and Hyde moving forward, and all we need is for Dr. Jekyll to show up on in two more tournaments, and Kirishima will be back in the Ozeki conversation. So hats off to him and hats off to Daieisho.
Yeah, both of them really had great tournaments, but Kirishima just gets some special consideration because it's always fun to see a wrestler start 0-3 where you're thinking, up, here we go. They're going to end up having a one of their worst ever tournaments, and then to win the next 10 is crazy. And Kirishima, I mean, he's been Ozeki before. We know he can do 33 wins in 3 tournaments, and now he's teed up for it perfectly. He just has to keep this amazing run of form, which started on day 4 of the tournament. Keep that going for the next 2, and he'll be right back up there where he, I'm sure, feels he belongs, and many fans will feel he belongs. So yeah, great performance for Kirishima. And then, of course, while we're talking about the surprising performances, we have to mention Kotozakura going 5-10 in this last tournament. Is there any word on whether his struggles had anything to do with injury?
Yeah, there is, well, I mean, there isn't word per se, but people noticed in the final few days that he was sporting a brace on his left leg, and I think the lack of real pushing or even like defending ability strongly suggests that he was having issues with his lower body. And I think if you just look at the folks that he lost to, guys that he never really loses to. He lost to Atami Fuji for the first time in 8 matches. He lost to Ura of all people. He lost to Kinbozan for the first time. He showed, no fight really at all against Onosato and Hoshoryu, guys that he usually does pretty darn well against. So I think it's fair to say that he was, not at his best today. And honestly, he probably would have, after he, reached 5-8, he probably would have just been better off just not competing the final couple of days, and just resting that knee. Because, now he's just got 6 weeks before the next one, and he's going to be Kadoban. So if he doesn't get at least 8 wins in the next tournament, he will be demoted to Sekiwake. And then he's got to win 10. Otherwise, he has to start the pursuit of Ozeki all over again, the way Kirishima is.
Well,
So,
I wouldn't get too worried about him. I feel like unless there's some serious underlying issue, I have really no doubt, at least at the moment, that he's gonna get less than 8 wins in the next tournament. But obviously, anything's possible. I believe in
well,
Kotozakura.
yeah, I mean, listen, you can believe in someone all you want, but after what happened with Kirishima and how far he fell, it's very hard to just it's hard to pump your fist, when someone is dealing with an injury and you don't know for how long. So, cautiously optimistic as we certainly can be, but worry is definitely justified with the way he looked the last few days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of really great performances in this tournament, and we can't get to all of them in the limited time we have. But also just worth briefly mentioning Hakuoho, 10 wins, his first time back up in Makuuchi after a long time. So congrats to him on coming back really strong.
Yeah, this is a guy that we thought would just like would honestly be in like the upper Maegashira, maybe even contending for the lower Sanyaku by now when we saw him make his debut, a year and a half ago. But injuries, 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 man. He had to drop all the way down to the Makushita division and had a very slow rise back up the ranks just of Joryo in order to where he is now. But it seems that he's finally healthy again. Maybe folks have had him a little bit figured out, which is why he isn't immediately charging back with like 11 or so wins like he had, back in July 2023. But this is a guy that I think we can expect will be slowly climbing the ladder up and will probably be up in like the upper Maegashira ranks by the middle of the year. And but Takeru Fuji, our Maegashira 11 and a former Yusho winner, he's already there, man. I mean, he's gonna be promoted to like just the edge of the joy in the next tournament. And with the way he's been, there's really no reason to think that he can't be in like the upper Maegashira or even low Senyaku contention at the end of March. So, there's a lot of guys to keep your eyes on, and I can't wait to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to look forward to over the next couple days, and next couple weeks, I should say. And definitely hit subscribe so that you hear the latest about our next videos. We're going to give an update as soon as we hear something about what's happening with Hoshoryu and a possible Yokozuna promotion, and we'll preview the next one as it gets closer. But thanks everybody so much for getting involved with the channel and liking and commenting. We're gonna read all your comments. We're gonna respond to as many of them as we can, like we mentioned, and we're looking forward to more exciting sumo news, hopefully very soon.
Take care, everybody.
New to sumo, here we go. Bouts and shouts, your weekly treat. Every champion you'll meet. Ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to sumo podcast fun.